Hi everyone! Welcome to Tia Talks. I'm Tia and I'm here to do a culture retrospective where I basically talk about anything under the sun from media to books to comics or whatever. We'll see. Today I will be taking a look at the smash hit phenomena that has had the whole country buzzing and that I have personally been quite obsessed with as of late, and that is Projek-High-Council. Now, I would like to preface this video by saying that these are my views and opinions on the show, where I will try to bring hopefully a new perspective to the conversation surrounding the show about the issues that are being presented, as it does tackle some super important stuff. Also, I'm very much aware of multi-level production decisions and censorship which comes into stuff that is produced for mass consumption. Thus, my criticisms will also be keeping that in mind. Do try to be understanding and kind, as this is my first video of this sort, as in a review. I am speaking from a subjective point of view, influenced by my own upbringing, environment, and beliefs. I also do not have any kind of personal experience that can be related to the story or character, seeing as how A, I'm a girl, and B, I did not go to boarding school. I'm not trying to influence anyone with my opinions, and if you disagree with anything I have to say, let's discuss it in a civil manner down below in the comments, or just click away if you hate hearing what I have to say. So just don't be mean, I might cry. This will not be an every episode play-by-play review, so the following summary I'm about to give is all you're going to get before we enter major spoiler territory in the discussion. So go watch the show if you haven't. It's available on Astro Video On Demand, and come back if you want to hear my thoughts, maybe.
Mankind have morals, values, ethics, and compassion, and this elevates us to
the top of the food chain.
Projek-High-Council is a 10-episode Malaysian television show which aired on Astro Ria from January to March 2023. It follows the story of two estranged brothers who reunite in an elite and prestigious all-boys boarding school. It follows their trials and tribulations as they navigate the toxic school culture and hierarchy, where at the top sits the High Council, an unofficial board of senior students who basically make life hell for everyone under the guise of creating real men. At the same time, our two main characters, brother Fakri and Naim, also have to deal with their strained sibling relationship and family problems on top of competing in the Pilihan Raya to choose the next Kapla, aka the new head of the High Council. This story is based heavily on true stories from the local boarding school culture, particularly those of high-performing all-boys schools, something that Malaysians are already familiar with, yet that has not been portrayed on a mass media platform such as this. First, let's get the easy stuff out of the way. In terms of the look of the show, I would say it was okay, nice to look at, and the shots were appropriate in presenting each situation. The cinematography wasn't anything groundbreaking, just standard stuff that made the show very easy to watch and follow. I didn't really understand the warm sepia-like filter that colored the whole show though, since it's not a show that takes place in the past, as in the characters' past, but rather their present. Though I understand if it's for like the Y2K style that they're going for. I like the soundtrack, especially the theme song. It's super fun and matches the boyishness of the show. For the setting and environment, it's your standard high school affair, so yes, they obviously shot in a real school and it looks like it. The fight scenes were good. I like that there was very little of that chaotic, shaky handheld cam that usually gives you a headache, and it allows you to actually see the fight choreography. The slow-mos were not obstructive and used to full effect, and you could feel the real grit and ruggedness, especially of the fight scenes with the blood, the sweat, and everything. So nothing more here. Let's move on to the yummy fats of the show, or should I say lean meat. It's a good looking cast. I have to admit, I have been caught up by their masculine wiles very much so. It's definitely a contributing factor to the show's current popularity, if not the main factor, not to take away from the plot or anything. The cast is pretty good. The strongest element I would say was that they have really good chemistry as an ensemble. Major scenes that involve a lot of group acting and character interactions were what gave the show the most shine. They all have so much charm, and they definitely brought to the show a life of their own, each of them very distinct, and I felt like no two main or supporting characters were really the same. Unfortunately, because it is a drama, basically a melodrama, the over-the-top, loud, exaggerated macho acting was just not really for me, but it did make for good entertainment despite being a little cringy in some moments. The Ismet family dynamic was convincing. I especially like the palpable tension between Naim and his mother the most, not to mention they literally look related. I enjoyed Nadir Nassar's acting, especially the last 2 to 3 episodes. Admittedly, I did not know the rest of the cast before, at least as actors, but I think Amir Ahnaf as Kahar really shined as a complex antagonist with like some serious daddy issues. The fight scenes were actually some of the best acting in the show. You can tell they worked very hard on it and made it very convincing. The moments of panic or worry during those manifesto scenes also caught my eye, and they managed to emotionally deliver the weight of their manifestos. And overall, the casting was good. I just hope in the future we can see talents from a different pool other than the Hero or Dewi Remaja channel, because basically the entire cast is from there, and I mean that can't be the only crowd to pull from. The setting seemed at first a little far-fetched until I heard that all boys schools actually operate like this, so I can't say much on how realistic or accurate it is. There are a lot of comments on that aspect on Twitter, which you can look up yourself. But I think one major confusion that I had was that the lesson at the start of the series that they explained could be bought. So I went in thinking that this kind of lesson was something that the students had to earn from the High Council, which was going to be the premise of the show. But instead they explained that you could buy the lesson, and with that I thought it would be more of a class. There would be more of that class division between the students, because the lesson is like 120, $200 for like something like that, which normally people wouldn't spend on. So that was one thing. Also, this is me nitpicking. It suffers from what I like to call the euphoria high effect, where there's absolutely no actual indication of real student life among them. Like, none of the characters seem to ever study aside from plot relevant scenes where they attend class and the plot relevant teachers try to present some moral or give a history of plot device psychological studies. Hi all, Tia from the editing room here. Another big like nitpicky part that so bothered me in this series was the use of like real life references to literature and like science experiments to fit the analogies of the story. But especially in episode 2, the rat experiment that was referenced actually had no relation to the metaphor that was being presented. The experiment was about overpopulation leading to societal collapse, not like the utopia straight to societal collapse. There was the main point being overpopulation. Like, okay, this is an elite boarding school. There is no overpopulation factor. You were all chosen to come to the school, so I just felt like, yeah, this analogy, metaphor, whatever, just did not fit in with what they were trying to say. That's all. Back to the video. I really like character-driven stories rather than ones with bombastic plots. I want to see characters react to their environment and the people around them, so I did enjoy this aspect of the show, where more or less each main or supporting got a backstory or some sort of arc, thus you can understand why they act and react in certain scenarios, which makes for some really compelling characters. Once you understand the motives of the characters, then you can actually really get into it. Though I do say that it does get lost in the sauce a little bit in the middle, where even the main characters' motives are not exactly obvious and they get a little muddled. For example, Fakhri's transition into an almost Kapla-like figure should have been developed a little more. Also, I did not understand Prakash's motivations for wanting to contest in the Pilihan Raya in the first place. Notice how I have not mentioned Mia even once. Yeah, well, I did not find her character to be of any importance at all. Her motivations had nothing to do with the main plot, and I think the time spent on her romance with Naim could have been used to explore the other characters and develop them more. You know how sports anime where it's like all boys and they don't do romance and are very introspective towards the characters instead? I think they should have gone that route. Other than that, I felt like some relationships, especially the family and sibling dynamic, the main characters, seemed rushed for a happy ending and thus took away a little from the resolution. It was just too good to be true, and I think this undermined the story they were trying to tell a little. This also diminished some characters' development, as they did not seem to fully address their own issues, if at all, towards the end. There wasn't a satisfying conclusion to any character arc that I can think of. It's one of those, their arc ends in time for the plot. However, overall, the characters were distinct from one another, and so were their viewpoints, shaped by their backstories and plot. So kudos to the directors and writers for that, and to the actors for being able to express it well. Now we're really getting into the meat of what I want to talk about in this review, that is the themes and issues that were presented in the show. This section is to highlight one of the main gripes I have with the show and with some Malaysian films as of late. Look, I know everyone is trying to push the envelope and create media that is socially conscious and relevant, and I truly applaud the effort to address serious, taboo issues that may otherwise not see the light of day on the mainstream stage. My main criticism, however, is that this show suffers from trying to tackle every social issue under the sun, but failing to properly execute or provide any meaningful narrative payoff as a result. It's a matter of how such issues are not only addressed or portrayed in the show, but also what meaningful role they play in the story itself, which is important in making people actually care about the real issue. And I know that censorship is a thing. However, this show obviously has gotten approval to address certain issues rather explicitly, which is what I will be focusing on here. Prakash's character, being the only non-Malay Muslim, exists in a liminal space where he is definitely more than a token diversity character, but whose actions ultimately had little consequence on the plot of the show. I think it was a missed opportunity, in particular, to miss out on him and Fakhri really ganging up and rallying the other students. But that's him as a character. What I'm bothered about was how racism was handled in the story. The first and most damning situation was, of course, the raw meat scene, where what Kahar did was basically a hate crime, and it was never shown that he faced any consequence for it other than people telling him, like, dude, that was wrong. I know there's this whole jibam thing, or don't be a tattletale, but this was one of the few instances where it should have been shown that there are consequences for his actions. If not with the authorities, Prakash should have been shown to hold a bit of a grudge, more of a grudge actually, for being racially discriminated against and, you know, call Kahar out. It didn't really affect their character dynamic much, which was a bit disappointing. Character dynamic between Kahar and Prakash. Like, how are you gonna just sweep over the guy who literally hate crimed you? Next is the shoehorning of Prakash's brother and the police brutality backstory. Its impact and motivation on Prakash's life in the boarding school is unclear to me. What was his goal with that backstory in mind exactly? It was just taken out of context and should have been left out to expand more on the in-school racial discrimination rather than trying to relate it with things outside that does not affect them as much. What would this show be without parental issues? The Malaysian melodrama staple. Literally everybody in the show has mostly daddy issues. I'm not going to lie, the entire Bapak Kau Pundan thing just left me a bit flabbergasted. From the first time it was stated in the show right up until the end, I was thinking, wasn't there a better way to tackle this? Now, the whole point of the show is to address toxic masculinity in the boarding school environment and to show how all these hierarchies and competitions are simply damaging. So I'm not going to get into the school part of the show that addresses toxic masculinity because it's already rather clear by the end of the story, but rather the issue in relation to the domestic realm of family, which is also a major theme in the story. However, they did not clearly address that in the family plotline. There was no attempt by the father in any capacity to defend himself against his sons and teach them that no, being empathetic is not soft, and by extension I feel like this is a problem with the show's message as well, as there was no one saying your dad's a good dad, actually he loves you guys a lot. There was no reconciliation between the mother and the father on the issue, and I feel like she should have definitely been the one to ultimately defend her ex-husband and recognize her own shortcomings in her opinion of him as a husband, and maybe a thank you for holding down the fort and taking care of Fakri all this time. In the end, no one even addressed the fact that calling your father a ponan is just wrong and why you should unlearn it. Just something to show that even adults have to face the reality that is their own prejudices and shortcomings, and I mean the mom here, and how their opinions and values shape their children the most. Also, I think almost straight up murdering your brother warrants some serious intervention, and we didn't even get to see a sliver of that, which was concerning to say the least. I'm not saying there needs to be a 20-minute scene of them sitting in a room getting therapy, but I think it would have been right to at least allude to them getting the help they need or the parents suggesting intervention. This show is all about addressing taboo issues, right? So I think had there been an inclusion of some kind of rapport being available for these boys, even just to show the audience that there is help out there for them, and there is, and it's not unmasculine to seek help, medical help that is, it would have been a better closure for the toxic masculinity theme. Though of course there was a glimpse of that unlearning in the emotional scene between Naim and his father, which was a step, but I felt like it was not enough. First, I have to admit I was very surprised that they even addressed this issue at all, and rather strongly, I might add. I don't have any complaints about the way it was portrayed. It was incredibly sympathetic and empathetic towards the victim, and I would say empowering in its message that the people around the character who got assaulted encouraged him and gave him the strength to report what had happened to him. Also, I want to thank the creators for not giving the assaulter a backstory. This is just like a pitfall of so many shows where they attempt to explain why someone committed the crime. And it ends up humanizing them for no reason. So I like how the assaulter in this story was discovered, got the shit beat out of him, and was kicked out of school. Yes, that's how it should be. I don't want a sob story of their life and how they ended up there, because other people have sob stories and they don't end up committing crimes. So kudos again to the show for the way they handled and brought light to this very real issue that isn't discussed much on screen. Okay, I want to start off this section with a very strong disclaimer. If you feel triggered already by the theme being discussed here, please click away. If you are already writing an angry hate letter, please delete it right now and click away. If you do not wish to engage with an attempt at trying to humanely discuss and address this topic, click away. I will not tolerate hate and discrimination in my comments. It's that easy. And if you're still here, I will be using the buzzwords sexuality and queer throughout just to avoid being, hunted down. I know it isn't an accurate term, but really, what is? I want to also say that I am very aware that censorship plays a huge role in influencing how this theme is addressed in the show, and am commenting with that in mind as well. The theme of adolescent sexuality, especially among the male Malay Muslim youth that are depicted in the show, could have been good despite all the limitations. Unfortunately, it seemed to play into the harmful stereotypes and demonization of queer youth in the few instances that it was insinuated quite strongly. While I did praise the show for showing SA, its effects and its consequences, it seemed to have adverse effects later in the story. So a major example is how the show depicts how it was wrong of Naim to use Amir's SA experience against him because it hurt his friend's feelings. However, it doesn't do anything to fight against the grievous stereotype that Amir was queer as a result of his SA experience, and that his care and love towards Naim was something to be ashamed of. That was very jarring for me, and I so wish that they did it in a way that did not relate his very blatant queerness with his experience of sexual violence. However, I found the very obvious queer coding of a main characters ultimately a step forward, because I think that the depiction of such wholehearted, soft male friendship, even to be seen between Ayam and Kahar, is something that should be acknowledged as important to adolescent development. You would think that Naim's Pondan complex was represented in his romantic relationship with Mia, where they were vulnerable with each other and they talked a lot about their feelings, but I saw it to be of the most consequence in his interactions with Amir, platonically or romantically or somewhere in between. And that's important because he really let himself be as open as he could with his very good friend. Now, queer people have existed in the Malaysian media for a very long time. The Malay culture has a place for more flamboyant characters like Sally from Upin and Ipin, and every gay best friend of a female lead in any drama or romance ever. With Ayam's character, this was their chance to have not played him as a joke, but unfortunately he's relegated to the lembut best friend stereotype. It would have been nice to see more emotional dependence between Fakri and Ayam, and I know there was a bit, but I feel like it could have been explored more, and Ayam is a serious emotional support figure in Fakri's life instead of simply being his bumbling, joking, sassy friend who should be protected. Overall, the show could have done without the homophobic jokes and gone with a more poignant acknowledgement that these vulnerable male youths are in a stage of development, and that it's okay to be confused sometimes, because if you can't think about these feelings inside you, then what growth is there to be made? Naturally, the show blew up, partly because it's part of the Projek universe, partly because the plot, but let's be honest, mostly because of the cast. With that, I have to say, really good job to the marketing team of this show. Like, Astro really put their whole astracy into the marketing strategy, the fan meetings, the premiere and finale screenings, the reach on TikTok through influencers, and cast engagements on social media. It was a recipe for success. Like, the team definitely understands its audience very well. It's definitely become a real phenomenon because of that. And I just want to say that the fan culture that has sprung up from this is very interesting to witness, because the demographic, Malay Muslim females, is just an endlessly fascinating one. Like how they interpret the characters, their dichotomous and frenetic interactions with the actors, the parasocial aspect of it all. I never thought I'd have material for a case study based on a local product in this sense. I mean, the level of fangirl engagement is pretty much on the level of Thai actor fandoms. And so I hope there will be more projects like this. In conclusion, I think this show is a really great step forward for the Malaysian TV industry, though there is obviously a lot of room for improvement. I am glad to see the amazing reception it's gotten, and I hope this will encourage more productions and creations of a similar caliber. Despite all my opinions, I would be lying if I said I didn't enjoy the hell out of watching this. At the end of the day, it's good entertainment, and as long as people continue to engage with this sort of media content, critically or not, I can only hope that we can see better stuff in the future. Oh my god, this was so embarrassingly long. Can you believe I wrote it all in one sitting? God, my life. Thanks for watching.